It will never change until you start treating the addicts. You can go after all the dealers in the world, but when you tell some 12-year-old or 14-year-old kid you can make $500 in a week, he's going to go sell drugs.
Where is, I grabbed his spot. I need to grab him up. I didn't know about Bauer.
And so they'll all get together, go on therapy and programming at the same time.
Is she, she's got stuff
I've
going.
spent 3 years.
Said she's not
I
gonna
think
be.
she's out of
I don't know
town.
what you call it here, maximum security, we call it close custody. But, I spent 3 years as a volunteer in close custody, dealing with drug addicts and alcoholics.
We
And
could do just a couple seconds after we get that pledge done to figure out what we need to do.
it's
Okay.
requires a huge amount of work.
Hello?
Hey Chad, we're just about ready to start.
If you can get 5 or 10% of them into recovery, you save a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. Well, Sam, what year did you go to SDSU?
96 through 2000.
Okay, so you're right before I got there.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, everybody. Are there any additions to the agenda this evening?
There are a couple of changes here. I'd like to move item A under old business to executive session for discussion of pricing under SDCL 1-25-2 sub 5. And I have a number of items to add in executive session for personnel and one item to add for consultation with or reviewing communication from legal.
Okay, so old business real estate purchase, item A, will go to executive session. And then a few other items under executive session with personnel
And legal.
and legal.
Correct.
Okay.
Motion to approve is amended.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion does carry. All right, visitors to be heard. If there's any visitors here this evening that'd like to share, please come up to the podium, state your name and address, and keep it to 2 minutes, please. All right. Seeing that there is none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do you have any items you want to draw attention to this evening?
2 items. The first is an agreement that's been executed with Hague Real Estate to represent the city on the purchase of 609 South Main, one of the items that we'll talk about later tonight. There is a special event permit application for the homecoming parade. No changes to that one. Same parade route as in recent years. Police, fire, and ambulance have all given their sign off, and the streets is ready to put up the barricades.
Motion approved consent agenda.
Second.
Further comment, the Prairie and Poplar Drive repairs now being completed. We've got Stockwell's comment that the liquidated damages are under review. Any detail that can be shared in that regard?
Yes, I don't have the number in front of me, but I want to say it was around, for the number of days we're looking at, probably 17 to 18.
Are you on the?
No, we're on a question about LDs for Prairie Poplar.
Yeah, I think we're around 25 or so, is what we had on there. But we met with the contractor, we did add some work on the jobs we were negotiating with him as far as how much time.
Sure.
He's going to be doing some of the additional work and whatnot, but I think by the time we're done, we're probably gonna be looking at, 8 to 10 days or so is what we can't justify. So we bring that to you guys for.
Yeah, that's something that'll typically be settled in the final pay application.
Yeah.
And there'll be a final change order to receive that, and then a final pay app, to wrap the project up.
Thank you.
Any other discussion with the consent agenda? All right, we had a motion and a second, we'll do roll call. Welch?
Aye.
Doherty?
Aye.
Bowers?
Aye.
Van Drill?
Aye.
And Swear.
Aye.
All right, motion does carry consent agenda. Now with old business, so again, reminder, item A is moved to executive session, so we'll move to item B, ordinance 653. Nate?
Mayor and Council, the first reading of this ordinance was approved at the August 26th meeting. Expenditures for Fund 212 have been changed since that time, so this is the second penny fund, to reflect 2 approvals that I anticipate tonight. Those changes include moving the $150,000 we budgeted for the museum roof and window project this year to next year, and moving the what was $50,000 for this year, but is now what we anticipate. You'll see in the memo later, approximately 90, moving that to next year because that's when the balance of the project will be due, even though we ordered it this year. Given that the changes are already budgeted for 2024, except for the portion of the playground, I would suggest it's not a substantial change to the ordinance, and that a first reading is not required for the second time. Did consult with Brett, and he agreed with our posting. We're good to go here. Recommend the motion to approve second reading.
So 150 moved to next year, but it's gonna be 90.
150 moved for the museum. We budgeted 50 in 2024 for the playground.
Oh, gotcha. That's gonna be 90.
Yeah, correct.
Gotcha.
And again, we don't know, I mean, the architect's estimate for the museum is 159, but we just don't know where this is gonna end up.
Motion approved, second reading.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the second reading. Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion does carry. Second reading of ordinance 653. On to item C, Department of Corrections sewer connection. Nate, do you have anything you want to start with?
Yeah, I'm not gonna read through the entire memo that I've got right now here for everybody's sake, but I'm sure you've already read it or can read it at your time. Stockwell's here tonight to talk a little bit about what they think we might need here. We're not gonna talk necessarily the cost of that yet, because I wanna review these, I wouldn't necessarily call them proposals, but these early estimates for what they think we'll need. Go back and talk to Kyle when he returns from the conference and review and make sure that we're where we actually need to be here. So I'll ask Mitch to come up, or John, I'm not sure who and talk about a little bit of some of the issues that we know we have and some of the issues that we know we're going to need to address to hit that actual capacity number.
I'll just kick us off. John Brown from our office has been working with our wastewater team and kind of leading us through this effort. We met with city staff and Nate and Kyle here last week just to get our arms around kind of where this is heading and just a little bit more background that we have been involved with. The state's projects, we're familiar with kind of what they're proposing for their facilities and wastewater, and I guess I'll turn it over to John to kind of talk through.
I can talk through some of there's some detail that we probably need to, just some things that probably need some corrections or upgrades to your existing plant anyway. And so some of those things are things that we probably are gonna need to do in the next 5 years or 7 years at some point. And so some of those things that we've talked about in the past, in a facility plan with you, were an equalization expansion, meaning so we can absorb some of the high flows that we have with infiltration. Basin covers, as you know, your existing basins, we have a hard time with cold weather. And so by adding some basin covers on there, there would be some ability to keep that warmth into the wastewater. Diffuser replacement, and now that is, I know you've done a fair amount of some repairs to the existing diffusers, but those are something that over about a 10-15 year time period, you need to replace all of them because they get weathered and they get, you know, brittle and stuff, and so they end up, you want to replace them. And so we've incorporated those items in here. We've included some biosolids dewatering. Right now, your drying beds are where you actually take your solids and you let them dry there. And sometimes, some years, if it's a wet year, you have
Sort of.
trouble.
Sort of dry.
But if it's a dry year, they work okay. But so we were talking about some improvements to that. And then there's some other miscellaneous equipment replacement that we were thinking about, which would be things like maybe upsizing some of your pumps at your main lift station. Just to get more capacity out to the treatment plant. If you're gonna do an equalization basin, you wanna make sure that you can get that flow out there to actually equalize it. Get it into a basin and then bring it back into the treatment plant as you can work through that process. There were some other equipment, your decanters we're starting to get, Kyle's having trouble getting parts for them. So at some point you're gonna have to replace your decanters. Those are the two bigger, I guess, floats that look like they're on each of the basins that skim water off the top of the treatment plant. Those, we need to, at some point, replace those. So we've included that in those miscellaneous repairs. We've included some electrical upgrades, such as in your electrical room, you need to do some improvements to your electrical systems. I mean, they're 12, 15 years old now, and they've got some corrosion in them, and so we want to update those as when we can, or if there's a possibility to do that. And so, you know, we've got a list of things that on your existing facility that we feel that you want to make, or you'd want to do in the next 5 years or so. But then, as far as for the Department of Corrections, the waste that, you know, if you were to receive their waste, some of the things that we would need is that aeration treatment, or the equalization basins anyway. We would want those. We would want another smaller tank that would actually, so when we receive the Department of Corrections waste, it's actually blended with our existing waste so that we got a uniform flow going through that. An SPR is what you have for a treatment plant. They're very finicky, and so the more consistent you have your wastewater going through that plant, the better off you are. So that you're not constantly adjusting the air to your basins and stuff like that. So the better, the more consistent the waste that you have going through your treatment plant, the better off you are. And so those are a couple of things, as well as the headworks. Your current screen, you know, it takes out a lot of your paper products and your plastics and things like that out of your waste stream. You know, you've had a fair amount of trouble with that, and it's probably time to upgrade that. And so we have included some of those items. Those are some things that I think Kyle might think there may be a little more than we need, and so that's why we really want to talk through that with Nate and Kyle when Kyle returns, to make sure we've got our list is consistent with what he's looking at and things like that. So those are some of the things that we would like to consider. Also, we considered is a dewatering press. So your solids. So right now you take your solids at about a 1.5% liquid. It's basically 1.5% solid, so it's mostly liquid that goes out to your drying beds, and then that evaporates or takes off the moisture off your drying beds. A dewatering press, which is something we would suggest you add to your pretreatment building, would be something that could get those solids down to about a 13 to 15% solids. So it's a lot smaller, a lot drier, still a fair amount of water, but then your drying beds would have half a chance of working better. And so then you could actually utilize your existing drying beds to maybe then use that and load it out and take it to a farm field. As far as some of the other items that we had considered, we wanted to talk a little bit about your existing capacity. Your existing plant capacity was named at about 670,000 gallons a day. Currently, your average flow, if you took your average flow per day, is about 180 to 200,000 gallons a day. And so let's just, for easy numbers, let's assume 200,000 gallons every day. And you can take about 670 at your full plant capacity. Now, when we say that, that means conditions have to be perfect to get 670. They have to have consistent loading, they gotta have a consistent flow rate coming to your plant to get 670. We feel that's not a very realistic number on a consistent basis. And so with the prison coming on, or the Department of Corrections, their waste would somewhere be in 180,000 gallons a day to somewhere 220,000, and they've given us some numbers that maybe be a little bit higher, but they could be a little lower. And so we've just used another 180, so you're in a sense doubling your flow into your plant. And so with that waste stream that's going to be coming is going to help blend to your waste stream. And so it's actually going to give you a better consistency with your loading to your treatment plant. But now you look, as it's easy numbers, now you're up to 400,000, about 400,000 average daily. So when you have your peak flows, when you have times when you can't handle it, you're still going to have a fair amount of flow coming in there. So we think that 400,000, you're going to be at a point where, you're going to want that equalization basin up front so that you can fill that EQ basin up and let it bleed through the plant during the full day. So does that make sense? So everybody, when you get a day when you've got a lot of infiltration and I coming into your system, you've got a consistent flow rate from the Department of Corrections, and you got your main flow rate, which would be 200,000 gallons. You want to blend those together so that you got a good waste stream coming into the plant. And so we've been able to go through some of those costs, but we don't want to, at this point, we don't feel comfortable sharing it with everybody until we actually have a chance to go through it with Nate, have a chance to go through it with Kyle, and then we want to dial this in as tight as we can so that you guys feel comfortable and we feel comfortable with what we've proposed. And so with that being said, I guess I'd like to open it up to any questions that you have, and we'd be glad to answer them.
Mayor and Council, I want to add, I think if you haven't had a chance to go out to that plant yet and see how it all works in a system, just holler, we will make that work. Kyle's gone at the conference this week, but I think, if you haven't had a chance to see this and see some of the struggles that we do have out there on a regular basis, Bill's familiar with the cooling challenges, for example, for the electric room. But there's, Billy's seen the screen at the front. But I don't know that everybody's seen the whole system from start to finish, what actually happens to that stuff. Once it gets to the system and how we send it out and all that. I mean, it's quite a process and it works. But yeah, it can be finicky and we've seen some
The
challenges.
finicky part of it, just when you're an operator, your stress levels, here or here, depending on how it's reacting. And there's just been challenges in the past, especially when we have those floods. I mean, you guys know the stress level of operating, I think, can be.
What we don't want to get into is where we were, 5 years ago, where we were regularly getting warning letters from Danner for not exceeding our limits.
And I think what you guys have done in the past, over the last 5 years, a lot of infiltration improvements, meaning your collection system. We see that on the charts. Your average daily has gone down quite a bit. Now granted, it's been fairly dry the last couple of years, but we think we've gotten a good jump on your infiltration that's coming into your gravity system. And so I think we gotta keep going with that. I mean, you guys have a good plan to move forward with the collection system, but I think it's important also that I wanna close with this, that you do have a fair amount of work that you probably need to do on that existing plant even if you didn't take on, the Department of Corrections waste, you've got a fair amount of work that's gonna come, and then as a result of that, may end up with another surcharge or another cost. And so, the value of maybe considering a Department of Corrections would be simply, so maybe some of that stuff could be, part of the cost of that, that upgrade, where, you need it, whether you add Department of Corrections or you don't, and so some of those costs could be shared with maybe the, the upfront costs that, the Department of Corrections or the state might be able to share with you, so.
Mayor and Council, speaking of the state, Ryan Bruner from Governor Nolan's office is here tonight. Just want to introduce him, and if you have any questions, we'll have some discussion.
Well, thanks, Nate. As I said, my name's Ryan Bruner. I'm a senior policy advisor to Governor No. I'm here mostly tonight to introduce myself as we started this discussion and negotiation process. Just appreciate the opportunity to do that. Part of the reason I'm here and been working on the sewer agreement, I used to be a city councilor in Brookings over a decade ago, so a former city councilor myself. And then I worked in economic development in Brookings, and one of the projects I worked on was the Bell Branch Cheese Plant, which has a very large waste management agreement as well. And so not a lot of people in state government have worked on waste management agreements, and so being in the governor's office and working with the Department of Corrections, it's something that I stepped into working on those negotiations. As you're probably aware, a couple weeks ago we had a discussion with Harrisburg where they didn't decide to move forward with our sewer agreement. We were looking at putting in sewer lagoons over there, and the next morning Nate texted me and asked if we could have a conversation, and so appreciate the opportunity to do that. We don't know if it's feasible, right? On your end, you've got Stockwell looking at it. On our end, we've got engineers looking at it. We don't have any of that information back. And so I know the Office of State Engineers has sent some information over on our process. We have a screening process. We have a grinder. We have pins. We have a grease removal system. So there are a variety of things on the state prison side that we can do. Possible some short-term detention for those high water flows. We can enforce and use water restrictions if necessary in some of those situations as well. So there's a lot of that stuff. We're looking through what that would look like going into your system. But again, we're still in those early phases. I did tell Nate earlier that because we're really just examining the feasibility, and we appreciate your partnership and wanting to look at this, providing you guys move forward with the $5,000 tonight. I'd encourage you to do that since Stockwell is your engineer, but the state is willing to reimburse you for those costs. So if you guys approve that, if you invoice Department of Corrections, you can send it to me, we'll reimburse what your costs are. So, because we really don't know, right? We're at an exploratory phase. I don't want you to feel like you're taking even a $5,000 financial risk when we're able to do that as part of our project analysis. So I wanted to make that offer tonight. You guys will pay Stockwell and we'll be able to reimburse you. And so it is important that we work through this in a timely manner because we have ARPA money appropriated that has to be under contract by the end of this year. It doesn't have to be spent for 2 more years, but we have to have that under contract. And so kind of our starting point is similar to Harrisburg. We were doing 175,000 gallons per day on a take-or-pay contract where we would pay for that amount whether or not we used it. We were paying $52,500 a month, which works out to about $10 per 1,000 gallons. So a commercial grade sewer, so we were doing a higher rate there in lieu of surcharges, but there's lots of different ways that we can have those discussions going forward depending on what works for you. We had a $9,000 per month connection fee, and that's just based on the number of households that the prison is equivalent to, and so $9,000 a month times 12 months, $108,000 a year just in a connection fee that you guys can use if you do have some upgrades you need to move forward with, plus that take-or-pay contract is that fixed income basis. That's what we were discussing over there. Certainly flexible if there are things that work better for your financial model. We can certainly have that discussion, but that worked really well for the state because it's fixed budgeting. We budget on an annual basis, so if we know we're going to pay so much per month, set amount, and then if we go over that, there's additional fees, but we kind of have that dialed in pretty well. And so that would kind of be our starting point. Our capacity purchase offered them was $7,179,000, and so that doesn't count the monthly payments or the connection fee or any of that. That was just a capacity purchase that's allowable under ARPA, and that can be used for whatever really the city wants, whether it's surcharge reductions or adding on to the plant or dealing with those couple 100,000, 175,000 gallons per day. So we're pretty flexible. There's a lot to determine yet. One other thing to point out, there's a statute that has to do with sewer within 10 miles of a community. Right now, we're at 10.4. So we would either need to see the city annex some land by 2028, or legislatively, we could write an exemption into that statute and just say, notwithstanding the provision of that statute, the state of South Dakota can run our sewer to Lennox. And we would just do that as part of the prison construction bill. So there are some different things that we need to account for, but we can put that all into the contract. And so that's just a high level kind of overview of what our starting point is, what our discussions have been with Harrisburg, and appreciate you guys being willing to explore this opportunity. Hopefully an opportunity for the city and saves the state putting in sewer lagoons. If we're gonna build a $700 million prison, we prefer not to have stinky sewer lagoons right outside of it to the south. We did buy an extra 160 acres that we own over there, so we could put in sewer lagoons if we need to. But we'd look for community partners as a preferred option. So we had not been looking at Lennox in this case because of the 10 miles, and we've been working with Harrisburg, but now that that's off the table, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss with you guys. And I think I gave each of you my business card. If you have questions about the prison, anything like that. We are still in litigation, so don't talk a lot about some of the other details about the prison publicly, but if you've got questions, certainly available to answer what I can, or if you reach out to me, shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to set up a time to visit. So that's all I have for tonight. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ryan.
And council, on that note, I'd recommend a motion authorizing up to $5,000 for services related to DOC sewer connection from the current year budget.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to authorize up to $5,000 for services related to DOC sewer connection from the current year budget expenses. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I wanna know a little bit more about the grinder that's going in, or that is drawn in the plans for the prison to really knock down what we're faced to process. And what kind of fail-safe is in place for that. You know, it's a little Greek to me, but I understand just the basics of it. And having something that's super duper industrial to handle 1,500 people plus staff, plus kitchen, and Lord knows what's coming at it, that's a big, big grinder. Now, I don't know what the plans look like. It's a concern.
I think Dave did, Office of State Engineer sent that.
They did. Just seeing if I have it in my file here. I know I have it in the email. Who was the engineer again?
Sayer
HDR.
and HDR. Well,
And
Sayer.
Sayer's the lead, I think.
The actual engineer. The-
Paul Gorman,
No.
or
Rob Pearson.
Ray.
Ray Pearson.
Would the grinder also be located at the site?
Yeah.
So all maintenance done there for it and the screen washing and all that?
Yep, that would all be property of the state.
So,
We're not asking you to take that on or the transport over.
Right.
pre-treatment would be on site at the lift station, left screening, no grit removal. No treatment for fog there, but they will have 3 separator tanks installed outside the food service laundry area. This is all very preliminary, but so they'll be separating it all on site before it gets to us.
Good.
You had mentioned a detention pond or area or whatever there as a potential, I mean, is that a for sure, like for like a flood type situation to
Yeah,
get rid of some?
there's a detention pond in the design now. You know, when we had the 1,000-year flood of a couple weeks ago, I was there the next day. I actually was in Sioux Falls at the EOC, and then I went down and joined John in North Sioux City for 5 days, 4 days, whatever it was. So, but I stopped, we drove Highway 11 down there, right? The interstate was closed and Highway 11 was still open. So, and I took some pictures of the site. For a 1,000-year flood, there was very little flood damage to that site. In fact, there was a little, one area where the culvert washed out, and there was a little water in the one corner, kind of where the parking lot would be. But we do have and that's without any improvements. So there's a detention pond in the design. One of the things that they were looking at is, could there be some overflow because of your guys' capacity issues? And so they're still discussing that even as part of our feasibility. You know, they haven't, they said it'd be a few weeks, and so we should have that pretty soon, but what it would take for a lift station and force main and some of that to get the sewer 10 miles over here. You know, I don't know the topography east and west, but no lift station would be needed, so there's some of that design, but we do have that extra 160 acres that's there. Like I said, we prefer not to put sewer lagoons on it, but if we need to do some overflow type stuff, we've got plenty of space.
Yeah, that's not quite a fair comparison with the ground being undeveloped and its ability to take on the water. Once you pave that and put a giant facility there, its ability to handle massive rain changes dramatically.
Yep. Well, that's why I have a stormwater pond built into it, right, just under,
Right.
you have to keep your stormwater on site, and we'll be able to handle that fairly easily. And there's still a lot of grass areas in the prison design, you know, between buildings and that, but there'll be several 100,000 square foot of building that will certainly have runoff.
Yeah.
But we can count for that, and all that runs south already, so it runs to the south where the detention pond is, and then it runs south into that extra 160 acres that we own. So like I said, we've got lots of ability for future stormwater issues.
Yeah, good.
John, do you have some?
Yeah,
I assume
I'm glad that Ryan had mentioned, I'm gonna switch directions from stormwater to wastewater. I'm glad you mentioned the EQ basin possibly at the prison site, so what that'll help if you were to, you know, enter into an agreement here would be just that consistency with a flow rate coming to your plant. So we knew every day, at every minute is so much flow is coming, that would be very valuable to us, I know, so.
Or if a storm's coming, you could.
Yeah, so our storm, you know, as you all know, our storms flood our wastewater system. And if they could maintain or hold on to some of that waste for a little bit longer period of time and just bleed it to us slowly, that would be valuable to us as well. So I think, you know, we'll probably work closely with their engineers over the next couple weeks, 2-3 weeks, and make sure that we're all on the same page of what we could do to make sure that we can all benefit from those EQ basins at maybe both sites.
Any other discussion?
Concerned about our own ability to grow industrially with the allowance of the rest of our water capacity, treating our water. I'm very curious to see what the upgrades look like, so we can at least have opportunities to still grow from an industrial perspective. Lots more to come, I'm sure, but things to be considered as we go through this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely don't wanna be maxed out as a
Right.
result of this. We're not slowing down anytime soon that I can see, is, I mean, just residentially and hopefully commercially and industrially. It would be nice to have some room yet.
No doubt.
I echo that as well, Bill. One other question I had was, is there anything being done in the design to prevent infiltration from storms in that 10-mile pipe? Or how would that be monitored or mitigated?
It sounds like it'd be a force main.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't have much of a concern there, simply because it's, I mean, you're talking brand new pipe, it's PVC. It's pressured, what else are we missing? I mean, I look at that and I compare it to, you know, if you compare INI here to INI in Harrisburg's system is, you know, 90%, 20 years or younger. And so their INI is almost non-existent, whereas we've still got clay pipes here and there. We've got, in some cases, you know, spot repairs are very necessary, or a block here or there. We don't have anything connected to storm anymore, that's all been separated, but I guess I wouldn't have much concern for infiltration into the pipe. And I would assume that the facility itself is designed to separate everything from sanitary. Am I missing anything, Mitch?
No, I think these day and ages, it'll be a tight system, so there'd be very little INI. And I suppose any INI that you would pump gets charged.
Any other discussion, comments, questions? All right. So we had a motion and a second. Do we need a roll call for this?
I think it makes sense.
Spend money.
All right, so we'll do roll call. Swear,
Aye.
Bowers,
Aye.
Van Drill,
Aye.
Doherty,
Aye.
Welch.
Aye.
All right, motion does carry. Thank you for sharing, appreciate it. On to new business, Central Basin 4 project pay application number 14, Mitch.
Okay, so pay application number 14 is in your packet. We've got, you can see the current contract is rated at 8 million. This will pay out to a total of 7.4 million, so they're nearing completion of this project. They're in the last phase. They just put all the curb and gutter in, so now they'll start putting the sidewalks that are remaining, the driveways, and starting to probably pay that out with asphalt within the next 2 weeks, I would say. So this pay app essentially gets them paid to date as of August 23rd. And you can see we are still retaining on the project 5.4%, which equates to $400,000 roughly that we're retaining on the contract. So with all the deductions for what we paid previously on this application, we're recommending a payment of $366,853.73. And I would just go on to say that everything's been going really well on this. I think once they reach substantial completion, we'll be looking at a short punch list and getting the final payment to them and closing this job out in fairly quick order. Any questions?
Just to comment, as with the Boynton project, the updates that are being provided weekly are greatly appreciated.
Yeah, good.
I think having that project website is a great addition.
Huge.
We can share those updates, and we've noticed early on last year when we didn't share the updates on the app, the reader number on the website was very low. You know, and so now that when we noticed that we share it on the app, those reader numbers go way up. I mean, it just helps get all that information out there. I think in terms of like project questions, this is the biggest project we've had in my time here. Boynton probably being the other most impactful one.
Yeah.
It's very rare for us to get questions here about where things are at on the project. I think Josh would probably say the same thing.
Yes.
So communicating all that up front seems to have been a big improvement.
And I think our information is readily available, and we try to have everything out as quick as it comes up, and everybody really has been pretty well-natured all the so that always makes it a lot easier.
Good, any other questions for Mitch? If not, I'll look for a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second for Central Basin 4 project pay application number 14. Any further discussion? All right. Seeing that there's none, we'll do roll call. Welch?
Aye.
Swear?
Aye.
Bowers?
Aye.
Doherty?
Aye.
Van Drill?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thanks, Mitch. On to the next item, new business B, Museum Road and Window Project.
Mayor and council, bids for this project were opened on Thursday, August 29. Despite numerous contractors expressing interest in attending the pre-bid meeting, we did only receive one bid, and it was over approximately $40,000 over our architect's estimate. We believe that's due to the short window we had to complete the roof work. We did, though, grant additional time for the windows early on. Given the substantially higher than anticipated bid, I have discussed with our consultant architects possibly bidding in this winter, and we're thinking probably November, and give it a longer completion window in 2025. So, Lennox Historical Society was part of that discussion as well. We really don't see any major changes to conditions on the building. We're waiting another 6 months. And I did follow up with the architect again today. They do not anticipate any increase in their fees based on rebid. So we will come back, if you do reject the bid, we'll come back later this year with a new notice for approval. I recommend a motion to reject all bids.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to reject all bids. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing that there's none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Alright, motion carries. On to C, resolution 2024-9901, revised personnel policies.
Mayor and council, there was earlier this year an interest expressed in adoption of formal bonus policy. From time to time, we have awarded bonuses to employees whose work goes above and beyond what's expected in their position. Best practice would dictate that such bonuses are issued under an approved policy, and that's included here for your review and approval. I won't have you read through the entire policy document, but it did include the language here. Just a few highlights. There's an evaluation process, approval process, an amount that's capped at 2.5% of gross salary or annual compensation. And making clear to folks that when those are made, when we issue bonuses, they'll be made public through the publication of that monthly payroll report. Per the city attorney's wishes, the policy is being approved by a resolution, since it does delegate some of that authority to a combination of the city administrator, mayor, and the committee chair for that department. Recommend a motion to approve resolution 2024-09-09-01.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
No, I appreciate the review process as defined. Approval process, I should say, as defined.
Right. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. And motion does carry. On to the next item, Westerman Park Playground, D.
Mayor and council, we've been working throughout 2024 with the park board to identify a new playground for purchase for installation in Westerman Park. This is one of the goals that the park board identified last year for 2024, to identify a new playground and put it in its place. The playground represented here was approved by the park board at their August meeting. We did make slight modifications to this in early August to maximize our grant funding and increase features for children between 2 and 5 years old. Minimizing cost changes. So the current playground would be dismantled by city staff, as well as the two older climbing features that are straight east and then southeast of the current playground. We'll do a sidewalk and a curb cut to connect Main Street parking to the playground for access for those with disabilities. And the playground would be installed by the vendor. We are planning to secure and install the engineered wood fiber mulch on our own to get a better price. The freight on that is very expensive, based on where it's coming from, and the vendor thinks that we can actually get it for quite a bit cheaper if we're gonna do that ourselves, so. The budget this year included $50,000 for a new playground with goal to raise other necessary funds to the extent possible. We didn't raise a whole lot here. Additional costs of playground and fundraising will still need to expend approximately $39,000 of unbudgeted out of Fund 212, which is the second penny fund. That might seem like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, we're getting a pretty sizable playground here for $90,000. Looking at other communities and what they spent recently on, I would say comparable facilities, you're looking at probably closer to $150,000 to $200,000. I would recommend a motion to approve. Option 5.
Did we put this out for bid, or did we just?
It did not go out for bid. No, we were trying to keep it under the bid limit. We did get quotes though from other vendors. Those were reviewed by the park board back in, say probably March or April at the latest.
Did we check with anybody local, or were they all out of state?
There were some local, yes. I can't remember the other two companies. I could find that out. But when you're talking large scale, commercial sized playgrounds, you're gonna have to look regionally. It's not just gonna be, it's not Rainbow Play Systems, for example.
No,
Sioux Falls,
right,
that's
yeah.
gonna be able to do something like this.
All right, I would entertain a motion to approve the purchase of Westerman Park Option 5 Playground.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, seeing that there's none, are we just approving the option 5? Do we need to do roll call for this?
No.
I think so. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. And motion does carry. On to item E, tax increment financing policy.
What a better way to spend a Monday evening than reviewing a tax increment financing policy. Fairly dry stuff here, but I think fairly important as well. So as we've grown and as we continue to develop, I anticipate a lot more requests for TIF districts to come into the city. We do not currently have a policy for how we handle those requests or for whether we would approve it. It's really kind of an ad hoc basis. We've not been home to a ton of TIFs. It's just really been Countryside and Wilson Trail, and I think those are both sponsored by the county, if I remember right. Wilson may have been ours, but Countryside sponsored or Lincoln County sponsored the Countryside TIF. So I do anticipate more, even if it's just for Creekside Edition. We've been talking about, having seen what some developers have been requesting in similar situations in recent history, I'd prefer to get ahead of demand for those requests and adopt a policy ahead of time. The policy included for you here was initially developed by the City of Brookings in consultation with Toby Morris. Worked with Toby a little bit more as well as Brett, and we've made some slight changes to the language that make it a little bit more applicable and appropriate to a community of our size. Overall, though, I think we've got a good, solid policy here that will prevent what I would consider some wild suggestions for TIF reimbursement and restricted things that we know are necessary for public improvements to make this development possible. I would recommend a motion to approve.
I appreciate the updated language that you and Brett worked out regarding the modification of the Brookings agreement, or Brookings policy. Any way we can market our community better is a nice move on our part. Thank you.
Motion to approve.
I would add, talking about making this more predictable and marketing it. Part of the other side of this is making sure the developers know what to expect as well.
Right.
And right now, if a developer were to come to us and say, we want to develop 40 acres in Lennox, they don't know what to expect in terms of TIF reimbursement. They can't actually do their cost assessments to figure out what they're looking at. With this, you can get a pretty good idea of what you're going to be looking at. Sorry.
We have a motion by Bowers and a second by Vendrell. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Great, the motion does carry.
Motion to enter exec.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to enter executive session. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
same sign. And I declare us in executive session at 7:46 PM.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You remember his life, you get your.